dear Bagginses and Boffins.
So this person asks, why do we think Galadriel is a warrior queen? Is it because Tolkien wrote her like that, or is it because the time we live in now? I find it interesting that they seem to have chosen Galadriel as the main character, as far as we know. Almost all major things we know about the season 1 is about Galadriel, except for Meteorite Man. Yeah. I think this is an interesting question. For me, I ultimately think Galadriel is this warrior queen. Like, they chose her because she's recognizable to the fans, and she can blend it into the original trilogy, to the books. She's a character in those, and she's a character here. And they made her be a warrior queen because it's really hard to make someone like Gandalf, a more magic user that's more reserved, the center, the focus of the movie. So that's why I think they made her a soldier. I think people find that more interesting. They like Aragorn. They like Legolas, Gimli. But Peter Jackson does a great job of making you care about Sam prior to him ever fighting anything. Merry and Pippin prior to them ever fighting anything. So there are ways to do it, but I think they did want a female lead, which potentially is identity politics, but regardless, they wanted a female lead. They wanted someone that was recognizable, and they wanted that person to be a fighter. So you end up with Galadriel. That's, I think, why we get her as the main character.
Yeah.
Now, the funny thing is, Elrond, if they didn't want it to be a woman, Elrond would have worked because he is a soldier. But I think they wanted a main female lead, and so it had to be Galadriel. And then Elrond, because they already have a female soldier, or a female and a soldier lead, Elrond is now going to be more of a political type of character, trying to mend alliances. And so we're not going to get a battle-tested Elrond. We're going to get a more nuanced political Elrond, who I guess becomes more of a soldier-ish in his later years, whereas Galadriel starts out as a soldier and then slowly changes to a more wise, calculating person. Because like the thing is, we talked about a lot of these character changes, but Elrond is going to have to go through a double character, right? He's going to have to go from...
He needs to be a warrior too.
Yeah, so he's going to go from political leader who wants to use words to going into battle and being a battle-tested commander, back to being a more reserved leader of his people. So that's going to be a hard one to do, but I think Galadriel has a lot of the main burden of carrying this show because she is the lead, and because it's a female lead, you're going to have all this comparisons to other franchises that have tried to do female leads. So that's why I think Galadriel was chosen to be the lead and be a warrior. And I do not believe Tolkien wrote her like that, at least not from what I've read. And is it because of the times we live in now? Probably. That's unfortunately the answer for some people. But it's not that it can't work. It's just it is gonna have a long hill to climb. Anything to add about that? About why choose a female lead character in this show?
You covered it, yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's about all of it. We got a few comments here about learning more about the Tolkien backstory. I mean, this is kind of a funny thing to say, but why bother when the show can't use it?
Well, they're not allowed to use it.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem. I just, that's the most disappointing thing you ever heard.
Okay, last one. We're gonna do Roy. Guys, stop shilling for Amazon. I promise you, Roy, we are not shilling for Amazon. I am not a big fan of Amazon. I actually do want to do a breakdown with my friend here on some of the Amazon shows, just to for us to kind of get a glimpse of how Amazon produces shows and how I'm actually not a fan of those types of, like, they have a few fantasy shows out. I don't like them. I much prefer The Witcher from Netflix or Game of Thrones, early seasons of Game of Thrones. So not shilling for Amazon, although The Boys is actually a really good Amazon show. And this could end up being a generic fantasy show. I completely agree. That is our worry. And it's not that. Here's another thing I just want to quickly pick your brain about is we're not trying to gatekeep. Some people might be, but it's not like we're sitting here saying you have to be able to answer the trivia questions to become a fan of this. You have to know, all this backstory about these characters. You have to know about the broken toe, like, to become a fan, right? Like, that's not the point. But
I wonder if they could do that in the show. They could, or would they be allowed to? Could they allude to someone kicking a helmet and breaking their toe?
See, I think you could. I think that's allowed, but I don't. I'm not a lawyer. Don't listen. If Amazon writers, if you're watching, don't listen to me. I'm not a lawyer. Speak with your lawyer if you can break someone's toe. But what I will say is, like, the thing is, these people that are upset, I don't believe they are trying to gatekeep, although some clearly are. But really, it's about, we do want to feel at home. We want to feel like we have gone back and we're watching our favorite movie. For me, it's my favorite movie. I consider all of them as one movie, the original trilogy. And so I do want this to feel like that. So if this is a generic fantasy, I agree with you, Roy. I'm not going to be a fan of that, because there's a ton of generic fantasies out there that are okay, but they're not called the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. Like, that has to be really, really special. Otherwise, it is a failure. I agree with that.
Yeah, if they're just trying to piggyback off the name, that'll be. Oh.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, like, so you've started to watch The Witcher. It's pretty good. I don't know if you've seen Wheel of Time yet, but neither one of them are so special that you're gonna watch them hundreds of times. Like, maybe
The Witcher's just fun.
Yeah, The Witcher's fun.
I've not watched Wheel of Time.
No, that's one I want. That's the one that I think there's a direct comparison to how they handle that one versus this one. But the only difference is they actually have the rights to the Wheel of Time. So anyway, back to Roy's comment here. Roy, thank you for all the comments. I agree. It cannot be a generic fantasy. That will be a failure. It has to be special. Similar to how I actually think, in a way, the Hobbit trilogies, while they did make money and they were successes at the box office, I do view them as a failure. And I think Peter Jackson does too, when it comes to, did they recapture the magic of the original trilogy? I don't think they did. And so, even Peter Jackson couldn't replicate it. So it's going to be tough for this show to really give it a purpose and make it exist properly within the already established Tolkien cinema experience as well as the book experience. Now, eventually we're going to get to the War of the Rohirrim and how can that, despite it's not going to be live action, right? So how is that going to be judged in comparison to this, in comparison to the Peter Jackson stuff? That's a different ball game, and it's a much safer ball game. I think it was smart to go non-live action, because you end up not requiring a bunch of these big sets and all this stuff. You can really just sit down and get a really decent story out, and the visuals, it's no problem, because you've got access to great equipment now for those kind of CGI movies. So this is a much harder project for them, and so I'm with you, Roy. I am worried. I'm just choosing to be optimistic that it can come together, but yeah, there is some
Yeah, you got a dwarf that looks like Don Lemon, and another one that looks like Justin Bieber with hair gel.
Is he talking about Elrond?
I think he's talking about Elrond.
Yeah, I think he's yeah, the hair gel one, I mean, Roy, if you want, we'll do a whole video on hair design in Middle-earth, because I kind of agree with you. It's kind of weird to see the hair gel, but I will say this to all the people out there that are really upset about the designs right now. The Peter Jackson dwarf designs are not, like, if you view them in the same lens, they're not great. All their beards are super short, super trimmed. That is completely out of dwarf character. In fact, that is against dwarven culture. So we for some reason we were able to overlook that when it came to Peter Jackson's The Hobbit trilogy. And so I do want to first see the story before I start going overboard and just critiquing the design. But I agree the design would help immensely to just immediately bring us back into that feeling. But as we've pointed out in these videos, they don't have access to any of it. They can't even use similar looking things from Peter Jackson's movies. So that, I hate that, and I hate that they don't have the proper access to the material. There's just so much going against them at this point. But we are not shilling for Amazon, Roy. I can promise you that. Anything to add there about about you know, how do you view this? How does this have to what does this have to do to be a success? Like, it's gonna make Amazon money. People are gonna watch it, no question. But what does it have to do? Like, is it, if it's just as good as the Hobbit trilogies, is that good enough? That's a tough question. To me, I think that's literally our best case scenario. I think there is
bare minimum, I guess.
So that's your bare minimum. To me, that's my best case scenario, and that's how. See, Roy, that is how.
So we're set up for disappointment. Then
we are set up for disappointment, Roy, just like you. Don't worry. Follow along as we are just sad every episode about this show, because one of us thinks that's the bare minimum, and one of us thinks that's the best case scenario, which also, I am someone who has hated on the Hobbit trilogy in the past. Although I'm coming around to them. I think they are fun. They're just not, they just don't do it for me in terms of capturing that magic. So that's why I said that's, I think, the best case scenario. I think there's no way this captures the magic. You can't have any overlapping between the visuals and Peter Jackson's. You can't have any direct quotes from the Silmarillion. You can only have the backstories from the appendices and the poems and songs. There is just no way, because without some of those direct references to established work, you are at a huge disadvantage. So I see zero way this tops that, because they just don't have access to it. But yeah, let us know, Roy, in the comments.
I mean, that comes down back to they shouldn't even be making this.
That's right. Which is what Roy is saying. So Roy, we're looking like we're agreeing with you. They probably shouldn't have made this one. Like you said in another comment, there's a ton of cool areas that they could go and explore and write a bunch of episodes about that they do have access to. So looks like we're in agreement with you, Roy. So we will stop shilling for Amazon as soon as you do. I'm just kidding, Roy. Love you. See you in the next video.
I regret to announce this is the end. I bid you all a very fond farewell.